That being said, we're going to keep right on rolling. I want to first bring up our funding because we are really pretty self-sustaining. We are dependent on state funding. That means students in the seats. We need, our seats full. We need them there every night. We need to count them present or day, and we need them there every day. So that's one of our funding areas. We need learning gains. We're always pre- and post-testing our adult ed world because we're looking for those gains. And then we're looking for something called completion points, if you've ever heard that. We're dependent on course tuition. We have a Carl Perkins secondary K-12 grant. You can see the amounts there. You can read down those grants. In a little bit, I'm going to ask Joel to step forward and talk a little bit about the DEO. That's almost like about that. Okay, our current staff, you already met Mr. Albert Williams. We have Mr. Stephen Riggs as our welding instructor over here. Does a fantastic job, both of these guys do. Their classes are 11, and Albert's got 11 in his, I think 11, right? 11. And Mr. Riggs has 14, I think, during the day is his last count. And then he's got a pretty good group of 2 sections running night class. And that's one of our programs. These are becoming big programs in our for workforce development. We recently hired a lady named Sylvia Gouillet, who's really impressive. She's doing our daytime GED ESOL virtual. If you look in that picture way up on top, she's the one in the blue right there. She comes to us from Broward County. Most of you may not have met her, but she actually is kicking off a virtual and been doing a virtual ESOL. And she's got 16 students in there, and she is a workaholic, let me tell you. So we're happy to have her. Okay, I want to, Miss Brenda Escobar, I'm not going to read this all to you, but I want to point out a couple things, especially the first little bullet. She is our only GED and paraprofessional test administrator in our county. She spends Tuesdays doing nothing really but testing GED in our Pearson lab, and that's huge. Because that really is the culmination of what we want those adult students and some younger, younger than 18 students to be able to do, is to pass that test. So we give them a place where they can test. You can see all the other things she does. Today I had to ask her, I said, you really do all this stuff? And she said, yes. So she does. All right, Miss Angela Seeley, who's currently on a leave, a medical leave, but she does a lot of some of the other things. We've kind of divvied up all responsibilities in our program, and we've also done a little bit of cross-training. For instance, like this, when somebody's out, that we can pick up the slack. That means yours truly may have to do some things as well that I'm not comfortable doing or not probably competent enough to do, like in some of the record keeping and the budgeting. But anyway, that's what we do. We cross-train and we all pick up the slack. One of the things that we really had her do is the focus. We got kind of something we had to work on was tightening up the controls in that management, and we did. So there's a list of our teachers. I'm going to go through this rather quickly. Blue and red. You get it? All right, good. Then we have an enrollment. These are our current enrollment figures and numbers as of yesterday. So, I'm going to move right on. All right, so you can, now the last 4 years, if you look at, 2019-20, this is the last 4 years compared on November 1st. 2 years ago, knocking it out of the park. COVID hit, and then we got to a situation where maybe we didn't recover like we want to, but I think the trends are there that we are going to recover, and really our programs are pretty full. I like where we're at. I think everybody that is in our department just likes where we're at. Okay, visibility. One of the things, I'm going to have Joel come up here for a minute or two. Joel does a fantastic job with the DEO grant, and he also does our web and social media presence. And I'm going to tell you, the guy hits home run with it. He absolutely has done us a fantastic justice by doing this and getting us out there. He's going to show you he's into the data analytics and all that stuff behind the web, behind Google. And so I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit about what's happening in Hendry County in our adult ed.
Alrighty, I'm going to try to communicate this in a way that easily understandable. Sometimes he says I need to, you know, back off a little bit with the terminology. But basically, in our world today, where everybody, when they have a question, they pull out and they talk to the Siri or Google or whatever, or Alexa. I just wanted us to be more visible, so we started with the website, and then we registered with Google, Google Maps, Apple, and so this is a quarterly look at our Google stats. This is just Google, so this is how much we showed up in searches, but this is what was important. The blue section is discovery, and that means they weren't searching for us specifically by typing in Hendry County Workforce Program. They were just searching for programs to get involved with. And so that was a good bit of the 2,577 searches that we showed up in. So how does that translate for people that ended up on our website? So last quarter we had 3,500 site visits and over 10,000 page views, which means when they came to our website, they didn't just stay on that page, they looked around at some other things. But the really important thing is that 433 people connected with us, took action. Those are form. They filled out a form and submitted it to get involved with our programs. So I think that was, that's only going to improve, because when it comes to organic search, it builds over time, and our web presence is just going to grow from there. And I want to point out that actually Albert's video is now ranked #1 for diesel school in Florida, or last time I checked. If you want to get a feel for how the students feel about Albert, at the end of the last few minutes of the video, they share, you know, this was our second year, our second class, but that first class was a tough class for Albert's first class, and they really, you want to get a feel for the impact that he's having on these people. I encourage you to check that out. I think, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Joe.
And if you have any questions, you can email me or call me. Basically, the programs that I'm managing are to help people transition into a better job. And we had 12 people complete the program last year, and 9 of them got employment. So this year we have 37 people and funded by PEO. And it pays for our training equipment, it pays for teacher salaries, it pays for the scholarships for the students. Whatever we can do to make the program as effective as possible, that money is, you know, I have to jump through a lot of hoops to make it happen, but it's happening. So,
awesome job, Joe. Awesome. Joel does our website, and by the way, he does know how to put the ball in the hoop. He was also a very good basketball player in his high school times. So I'm going to just kind of turn it a little bit now to a little bit of initiatives that we have. We are being watched by the DOE, and there's one of the big issues this year is called integrated educational training. In other words, what that really means is our students have got to look beyond a target. In other words, they come to us and they're looking at GED. But this whole idea of integration is to get them to look beyond the basic skills and what could lie ahead. And that having to do with employment and workplace readiness and orientation and employability skills. So that's what we are going to be judged on as the years go on. You know, they're not going to just hit the GED and disappear. We know that's going to happen. We do realize that. But we are trying to incorporate some things along the way that will entice them to come and keep coming back. For example, in January, we're going to kick off the Dave Ramsey financial program in our adult ed ESOL and GED programs. One day a week. We have 2 teachers set up that are going to come in here and do that. So we're excited about that, to get them to think beyond that target. All right, our goals. I'm not going to read this to you, but we've all talked about some of these as a group and our leadership team. We have to recruit and retain. We can't train all the time. Keep training people. We've got to keep we're working really hard to support our people. I think if you ask most our teachers, most of them would say, that we do support them. They have something, they have needs, we address it. I'm going to skip down to the flexible training, the virtual. If there's an opportunity to have students log in with us and do things virtually and do it, we're going to do it. We're going to find a way to do it. Customer focused. How many of you know what WIIF means? What's in it for me? That's really what our students, younger students, want to know. What's in it for me? We talked a little bit about that this morning with some visitors we had over there in the diesel lab. They want something in a benefit as well. And then down on the bottom, underline, we're going to continue our social media effect, but we also are working on credentialing these our students. These people that come into us, they need that. And they need to continue to enhance what they have and what they bring to the table. And then continue to collaborate. We had a visitors here this morning. These people are important to us. We've got to listen to them. All right. I'm going to switch gears now. That's the end of adult ed. I want to talk a little bit about CTE, because I've learned over the last 2 years that our superintendent brought me into this. A lot of folks don't know what this is. And really, I just want to give you an overview of this, and maybe it'll get us talking, but you can see what Governor DeSantis says. We're going to be workforce ready. We're going to lead the country. So, get there. CTE is basically a program that allows for industry, work, career path related objectives. The state has defined 17 areas, clusters they call them. You'll see the check marks. The black check marks represent we're doing it in our schools. Now, it doesn't say where, but we're doing it somewhere in our schools. The green says we're doing it in the K-12 world and the adult world and dual enrollment. Okay? I would encourage you, if you get a chance, to go visit a CTE classroom and even become a proctor down the road. All right, anyway, I got that coming up down the road. There's also a DOE now has allowed an 18-credit CTE career pathway. There's a website down on the bottom that will give you more information about its statutes. Students have an opportunity now to come out with the 18 credits and pick up some industry certs and some other training down here on the bottom. Work-based learning. You see financial literacy. There you go. All right. CTE programs, been there, done that. I was, other than Mrs. Rodriguez, who beat me by 1 year at the Bell High School, I was one of the first CTE teachers in this county. I learned the hard way. It was thrown at me and someone said to me, you'll figure it out. So it's been nice to be able to have a little bit of that and explain this to not just to teachers, but administrators or anybody that has a question. Number one, you got to find instructors that are going to do this. And principals really are dealing with that all the time. Then we have to find industry tests, certifications that align to the courses. Okay? If you're in a digital design class, you should not be taking an agriculture test. You get that? There's a difference. Okay, so we align them. Then we have to find curriculum. And through experience, that doesn't always match. And then we have to embrace changes. These tests change every couple years. And they make them a little bit harder sometimes. So all we can do is continue to supplement and help our teachers. Okay, where are we on time, Dr. Gregory?
You're 15 minutes already.
All right, so anyway, we had to register CAPE academies. These are academies that we have to register with the DOE. You see them? If you want more information on that, I'll surely give that to you. Then what we have to do is then we have to name our courses. Whoops. All our courses that the teachers are teaching. I know this is really small, but the teachers have to decide what certification tests they're going to offer in those courses. All right, and then those are lined up over here on the left side, and then over on the right here are what we call point values based on FTE. That's the value of that test. So 0.1 would be 0.1 times the base student. And then the teacher gets a bonus for every student that passes it. Okay? I'll move on. Again, I mentioned proctors. This is one of the biggest issues that our schools face. You know, we have proctors. The teacher that's teaching the class cannot proctor the exam. Hendry County has nothing to do with the test. It is a third-party vendor that has rules. And the DOE enforces those rules. So we have to make sure that we have some help. You got to make sure things are ready to go. Availability of tests. Students get 3 attempts at the same test this school year, 20 days apart. So after 3 attempts, they don't successfully pass it. Kind of tough. I think it forces them to have to study for it. This just came out a few weeks ago, and I really wasn't aware of this, never seen this in this format. But those who have these industry credentials, maybe already from a year or 2 ago, can save bucks. I'm sorry that didn't come off as clear as, but can save college savings by having, with colleges, with articulation agreements with the schools. And our state schools have that. Okay. You heard CTE people talk about money. For every test that's passed, that's a 0.1 we mentioned. All right, the school gets money to be spent in that program. Has to be earned in that program. If the teacher leaves, the teacher may get a bonus for each test, but the money stays in the program. Okay? All right, in the last few years, if you'll notice 2017-18, somebody in this room came up to me one day, I'll never forget it. He said, "You know we led all rural districts in the state in CTE industry cert test passed." I said, "Get out of here, you're not serious." And he said, "Yes, we led the rural counties and some urban counties." Now we've had a little bit of a drop off in that time, but we're getting back. You know, a couple of years ago, all these CTE tests were supposed to be done remotely. It was a disaster. Nobody was geared for that. All right, almost done. Trends in CTE are clear. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We need proctors. Down on the bottom there, every 2 years, the state's forcing us to do a comprehensive local needs assessment. Guess what? This year. Which means we have to get all stakeholders together. We have to take a couple meetings. What are we missing? What do we need? All those things will play into something that report we have to send to the state of Florida. Okay, final thoughts. If you have further questions, call, email, stop by. Anything you want, we can send this to you. Here's a picture of Mrs. Boulay's virtual class. There's Danny Reynolds, our recent addition to our HVAC program. Give me 1 second. I'm almost going to wrap this up. Shirts are on the house. Hope you enjoy the shirts. Again, we hope the sizes fit. Dr. Egley, for your retirement, sir, we want you to make sure you have a workforce shirt.
Well, thank you, sir.
I think that's about it. Sure. Anything that we can do to help you, please, or any questions you have or need answers, just.
I do one super short thing since she's here. Ms. Soto works with all of the students in the 3 programs that I manage, and she really does so much to. It's one of the things about the program that makes it so successful. She text messages them, she calls them, she calls their parents, she goes to their house. She is very instrumental, and it's one of the things that I think elevated the program to the next level is having someone like that. And I really feel like, you know, with Albert and what he brings, and our new instructor in LaBelle, Danny Reynolds, is doing phenomenal in his class. But just having her support those students a little bit more. A lot of them really need it. Some of those kids that came in, I could have sneezed and they would have left. They were ready to give up. But with the support, we've seen some lives being transformed. So I didn't want to leave without saying that.
Thank you all.
Madam Chair? Thank you. I do have a question. So, this is one of the things I love to see. And, you know, I mean, the reality is all of our kids are not going to college, and these kind of programs just show what they can do out there. So, what other programs are we looking at bringing into our district?
Well, one of the things is a security guard. That's one of the demanded areas. We had to wait for some clearance on facilities, which through the state, which we finally got about 2 weeks ago. We're going to do a security. I would like to see us do some construction. Some of us have talked about construction. Facilities, I think, continues to be an issue sometimes. And then, of course, bringing people in, number one, you got to have a quality instructor that is in that room and meeting those folks' needs. If you're working all day and you're going to go take a night class, that instructor better be good. Otherwise, I'm not going.
Okay.
And that's the kind of stuff we're looking at. But, you know, we're always looking at new options. Trying to stay ahead of the game.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, these programs are vital to a lot of our young people today, because there's a lot of kids that could care less about going and sitting in the classroom, but they'll go out there and go see Albert and get their hands dirty, you know, and it just has their interest.
Correct.
And so these are vital to these young people today, I think. So
Thank you. Yeah, we're moving forward.
continue the great work.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Mr. Lickenouse, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm sure you're familiar with the appropriation that Glades County got for their new iGlades. I know that particularly in the Clewiston area, we have pulled folks from Glades County, possibly some whose needs are not being met at West Tech from Western Palm Beach County. Do you anticipate with iGlades as it gets going and gets up on its feet that is going to impact program participation?
I think initially it may, because it's new. You get a new outfit, you're going to wear it more than the old stuff. I think there's a little bit of that, but we're going to do everything we can to compete, keep our students, and hire the best people that we can do. It's going to be probably a little competitive.
I like competition. It makes you better.
Well, it does. It does, absolutely. So, yes.
And would you mind, I appreciate having the, on our board docs, your presentation, putting together a list of your CTE courses and your certificates, and just letting us know something very simple, a list of your CTE classes, and then how many kids in LaBelle are using or taking advantage of that, and how many kids in Clewiston. I'd love to see those numbers.
Yeah, and every year we do a CTE survey with different groups, students, teachers, admin, we'll do it with, and that reveals a lot of that. Yeah, we can do that.
I just
We
want to
have
see who's
13 teachers
participating.
on each side that teach CTE courses. What we're finding though is about a third of them don't teach but one CTE period a day. So if I got 4 preps as a teacher, you know, it becomes a time issue. But yes, so we think
All I'm
we can do
asking
that.
for is the number of kids in each
got it.
CTE program on both sides of the county.
You got it.
If Delaney knew that, would be perfect.
Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. Do you guys have any more questions or comments on that? Okay.
Good presentation. Good job.
Thank you guys.
That's your job. That's not what the chair does.
Thank y'all.
Dr. Ivy, you're retired.
At this time, are there any citizen comments on agenda items?
No, ma'am.
Seeing no citizen comment on agenda items, we'll move forward to the consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a board member would like to have moved down to an action item? Or are there any comments on any of the items on the consent agenda? We got nothing? Okay. At this time, Superintendent, may I have your recommendation on the consent agenda?
I recommend approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. I have a recommendation. May I have the motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Moving forward to action items, new personnel allocation request. Superintendent, may I have your recommendation?
I recommend approval of the new personnel allocation request.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Action item A, new personnel allocation request, passes unanimously. Moving forward to board member business. Item A, deputy superintendent job description. Did you want to speak about this first, or just go straight to recommendation?
Did anybody have any questions? The only thing we changed on there last year when we changed the organizational chart, it made the wonky appearance of who reported to who, and so we just basically changed the description to match who reported to the deputy superintendent so that it was accurate and reflect the organizational chart.
Okay, at this time, to have your recommendation.
I recommend approval of the new job description of the deputy superintendent.
I have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I have some discussion. The superintendent and I spoke about this earlier. When I look at this deputy superintendent / HR position, and I think about what we as a district would best serve the district and what we are looking at to best serve our organization, I think that your qualifications that you're looking for in a deputy superintendent, it's an entirely different skill set than what you would be looking for in an HR person. And this Hendry County School District is the second largest employer in Hendry County. Through conversations with our board attorney, the areas I think that seem to flare up most for school districts as far as litigation is your ESE and your HR. And, when I look at this job description, it requires, the 10 years of education. And I don't necessarily think that you have to have the 10 years of education experience to be a great HR person. And I would love to see, just considering, what we've had on our plate recently and, just anticipating living in a litigious society going forward, that we really drill down and take a strong look at these qualifications. Because do you want somebody who, if I'm looking for somebody a deputy superintendent, then I'm definitely looking at somebody with lots of education experience. But when I'm looking for HR, I want somebody with an HR, a degree in human resources and experiences in human resources. And I would just hate to see somebody with that kind of experience in HR be disqualified because they did not have education experience as well. Sense.
So Madam Chair, are you maybe thinking we should look at possibly bringing back an HR director at 2 separate positions?
Well, I know that the way that we looked at it before, the request was we wanted, the reorganization in order to put a focus on school safety. Because we've established that is across the board a very high priority of ours. I think to bring in a separate deputy superintendent would require us to either collapse a position or to be revenue neutral or to, pony up more money for a deputy superintendent. But I definitely think you have to have a designated HR. I don't know if everybody's particular wheelhouses are running well, if you even need a deputy superintendent. But I strongly feel, just with what we faced and will be facing going forward, that you need somebody very strong in HR. And I just don't want to see that, particularly when that's going to be the lion's share of the work for this position here, that we require it to be based on, you know, the education experience. Thank you. Know if I get any feedback from anybody else down there? Any thoughts? Walk it out with me.
I don't know, it's certainly an interesting concept. I mean, I don't know, where do we go with it? Do you have a suggestion? I mean, you're right, it is two different fields in some ways. I mean, you can be a great educational leader and run the schools, but when you get into personnel, that's a whole different situation. I'm not arguing that. Well, where do we go with that? For a long time, we had Dr. Aiken, I thought, did a fine job, but I know, I mean, I just talked to him today, some of the things that we gave him were real burdens, and I mean, he did great with it, but I don't know. I'd like to ask Dr. Aiken what he thinks. You think, you have sat in that chair, you have been an educational leader, you have assistant superintendent, and then we put personnel on top of that. That's a big plateful.
Well,
I'd like to know what you think.
want my opinion, I'm gonna give it to you. The moves that the superintendent Swindle has made by hiring Jason Brown, Roberto Sanchez, Tressa Duncan, and Mrs. Allen have provided the scaffolding and support at the building level, on the front lines, and that's where it needs to be. Being an HR director, you'll never be an HR director until you become one. That job is driven by board policy, collective bargaining agreement, Florida statute, and a direct line to the school board attorney. There's very few decisions that I make or recommend to the superintendent without going through those parameters. If you can read and follow instructions and get advice from the board attorney, you can do this job. Mr. Swindle has a boatload of directors that are top-notch. They run their kingdoms with great efficiency and effectiveness. The only problem we have is when people don't check with me, or when I don't check with the board attorney, because that communication must filter up through the organizational chart so that we have continuity and consistency in the leadership at all levels. Because the principalship is probably the most difficult job of any job in the leadership realm in today's world. And those principals now have more support than they've ever had in Hendry County school history. So I applaud his vision to provide that support to the frontline people. The district people, we've got the board approved Frances Canales becoming an administrator of HR, which takes her to a whole nother level. That increases her job expansion, it's job enrichment for her, and I can now delegate more power and authority to her, commensurate to her responsibilities. Mr. Semmerdike, that was a great move on the part of the board. Because that department alone consists of 3 people. Payroll has 8 or 9. I say payroll and finance. Those are the 2 hubs of Hendry County School District. Nothing happens in Hendry County School District without those 2 hubs. Everything goes through those 2. Yet HR is the smallest of every department in the district. That's because you've got 3 thoroughbreds working in that department, and they are workhorses, and they carry the load. Now, they are overworked, they are overwhelmed, and they are underpaid. But an HR director, since I've been in this job, I only make the tough decisions. And I make the decisions, most of my decisions are in concert with Molly Shattuck. If you look at the phone records, I bet you I run up the tab on time speaking to the board attorney, because I want to make sure that my backside is covered and that the board is covered. Have I made mistakes? Yes, I have. Did Attorney Shattuck tell me what I need to do to correct those mistakes? Yes, she did. Good legal advice is worth every penny we're paying for it because it keeps our fat out of the fire. And being an HR director is not that tough of a job as long as you're willing to read the policy, to follow the policy, to look at the collective bargaining agreements, because believe me, folks, we have collectively bargained much of our power and authority to the unions. And that is oftentimes what guides and directs the decisions that I have to make. And that's just part of being a large organization. But yes, it is very doable. A person that can read and follow instructions, and follow policy, and coordinate and consult with the board attorney, and make recommendations to the superintendent can handle that job. Because the heavy lifting is done at the building level. That's a long-winded answer to your question.
Boy, I'm telling you.
That was a good clarification.
I am so glad that I asked.
Yes.
I truly am. It gave me a lot of clarification. You gave me a lot of insight into that. You're right, it was a little long. Very influential though. It was very important for me to hear that.
Well,
Because you walked in those shoes, that's exactly what you did, and I really appreciate your long-winded answer because it helped me clarify that. Thank you.
Your long-winded answer evokes some more questions for me. 'Cause I love to drag it out. So when you talk about the frontline support that our principals on the school level are getting, do you think that the addition of Ms. Allen, Ms. Duncan, and Mr. Sanchez alleviated that from your plate?
yes, they handle things now, Mrs. Busey, that I used to be overwhelmed and just absolutely trying to juggle 3 different objects of different size, shape, and weight at the same time in the air. That has eliminated me dealing with the day-to-day problems associated with secondary and elementary schools. They have taken on a huge workload by handling those problems, which is where they should be handled.
Absolutely.
At their point of origin. Because I should not get involved in those decisions unless I get a call from Mr. Sanchez or Mrs. Duncan. They have to have the power and authority commensurate to that responsibility in order to be effective leaders. If I take the sword out of their hand, so to speak, I've taken away their power and authority. They oftentimes will call me, Mrs. Busey, and ask me, say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I have, what do you think? Because I'm the last of the old gray wolves. I've got more experience than most people in the district. We've got 6 new principals, and they are becoming principals. They didn't get in that job with the full knowledge and skills that they needed to take on that job. They're learning that job. Like Mr. Lukenhouse, they're figuring it out. He said that during his presentation. They figure it out. And when they don't know, they're very good about calling Mr. Sanchez or Mrs. Duncan. Say, hey, I need some help with this. And if Mr. Sanchez or Mr. Duncan Mrs. Duncan have a question, they'll call me. And if I'm not sure, I'll go to the superintendent. Or I'll say, I don't know, let me talk to Attorney Shattuck. Because most decisions we make in education do not have to be made like that. We can step back, we can slow the train down, and we can look, investigate, and ask the right questions, and then come up with a better decision. Because if we want to go far, we go together. We don't act in isolation. That's the beautiful part about the way Mr. Swindle has organized his team, that it's the communication is the key. Where we break down is if somebody doesn't check with me. We got a personnel issue, they don't check with me, then I've got to undo what's been done. And when it's hard to unring that bell once it's been wrong.
What would you say the percentage of you working on HR-related issues are versus the scenarios you were talking about right now?
Well, that's kind of a, it depends question, because Mrs. Houston, sometimes there's days where I've got 4 or 5 hot topics that I'm dealing with. Lawsuits from the insurance company, lawsuits from injuries, lawsuits from workman's comp, and I'm dealing with personnel issues. We're having to put a personal and improvement plan, or we're having to write up a written reprimand or a written warning. And we have to do the investigation, and we have to make sure that our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. This week, I haven't had it. So some weeks you'll have 4 or 5, some weeks I won't have any.
What would you say the majority of your time is spent on average?
On now, right now?
Well, I mean, not this week
Okay.
because you haven't had any major
That's
flare-ups thus far, but
Well,
on
it's-
average
it's-
means like if you think about all the
It's
farther.
hard to say because, you've got to do verification of experience. You've got to do the background checks. I got to make sure that Dr. Staley is coordinating her ESE department with Mr. Sanchez and the secondary school kids that have a 504 or an IEP. And it's all over the map because there's 9 directors. And each one of those directors are operating basically in their own kingdom. And there's 10 different schools plus the Montour Early Learning Center. We've got to do personnel allocation. We've got to do transfers. We've got to do resignations. We've got to do family medical leave. We've got to deal with the insurance company. We've got to deal with the attorneys. So it's all over the map.
So
it's hard to say what I do on a percentage basis.
So you would say like the deputy superintendent position is kind of like the triage person, or that's where because what I'm trying to decide here in my mind is are we looking at thinking about what we truly need? Do we need somebody, just a straight power HR director and let the other directors man their own wheelhouses and be responsible for those? Or do we need a position like the deputy superintendent? Like this is kind of a hybrid model on this job description, but is it necessary to have that deputy superintendent serve in that position where the people are bringing problems to you? I mean, to be that, like the troop mom or whatever, troop dad?
I think I understand your question. If money was no object, I would say Mrs. Nelson's comment would be spot on. Let's hire a full-time, dedicated HR director and let the deputy superintendent be the deputy superintendent that is the jack of all trades and a master of none. And that's basically what it is. But now the deputy superintendent is a jack of all trades and a master of HR, which I'm learning by doing. You learn by doing. You figure it out.
Well, that's because you
And when
went
I
to
don't
school
know,
for
I call
education.
and ask.
But it's because you went to school for education. You didn't go to school for human relations management or...
Well, there's a lot of specificity to any position. I couldn't do Dr. Staley's job. I couldn't do Dr. Mundy's job. I couldn't do Kevin Lukenhouse's job. But they couldn't do my job either right now because they haven't been put in that position. They will never become an HR director until they become one. Just like, and I'll take Tammy Bass, for example. Tammy Bass came up through the elementary ranks and then went to the high school as an assistant principal, and now she's a principal. Tammy Bass is doing as good a job as anybody, but she's still learning every day. And she's got a supporting cast, folks. She's got 2 assistant principals and 2 deans and an athletic director, and together they make the decisions that are in the best interest of LaBelle High School. And that's what we have to do. We have to develop the leaders that we put in those positions and give them the opportunity to become better leaders. Because you're either going to get better or you're going to get worse. You're not going to stay the same. I'm hopefully, One of the reasons I'm bowing out right now is because HR used to be run by Larry Worth, then it was Dennis Veal, then it was James Seeley, and now it's Robert A. We've had 4 HR directors in the last 6 years. We need some consistency in this position. We need some continuity in this position. Because what you've got now on the organizational chart is a pretty good, powerful paradigm. It's working. People working together, supporting those on the front line, giving them the scaffolding and support they need to help teachers do a better job in the classroom. That's what it's all about. Because none of us would have a job if we wasn't for those students.
Amen.
None of us would have a job if it wasn't for those teachers. And that's where it really matters. And that's the primary focus that this superintendent has placed on people that he's put in key positions. And if it doesn't work, it'll be on him. But I believe that it's going to work because he's putting his resources where they need to be. He's keeping those people on the front lines supported. And I think they feel supported. They may not like the decisions and the answers that they're getting, but that's part of the process of being held accountable. You know, Mr. Swindle overrules some of my decisions. That's his prerogative. That's why he gets to be superintendent. He has the power and authority to do that. He may modify one of my decisions. That's fine. That doesn't bother me because ultimately he's responsible. He can delegate anything under the sun except responsibility. And my job is to try to keep things off of his plate. My job is to try to make him look good, which in turn makes you look good. And that's what it's going to take, is to have somebody that has that type of skill set that can do multiple jobs. Even though they may not have the specificity of training, they can learn how to do it. And they learn it by doing it. Again, a long-winded answer to a simple question.
I know, never again.
But it's a very complex organization that we're dealing with here. You know, you've got over 1,000 employees, over 7,200 children. It's a small rural district, but we have a good system in place to support those that are on the front lines. And I applaud the superintendent and the board for that type of support because the teachers are the most influential person to make a difference in the academic achievement of our children. Principals are the second most important. And then their support staff, their assistant principals and deans. And then all of us others, we're oftentimes just removing barriers or putting out fires or fixing things so that they can do their job without having to worry about doing all the other stuff that goes along with it.
Mr. Lucas House said your 15 minutes is up.
Yeah, you're 15.
I try not to ever speak, but I'm passionate about what we're doing here, and I appreciate the opportunity to say what I had to say.
Thank you.
Very well received.
Yes, very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there any more comments from the board?
I'm not saying a word to him.
Yes, like not to Dr. Egley, but amongst ourselves. Is there any more questions or comments? Okay, I just wanted to, couple of things that I picked up from the person who will not be addressed, was that we have 1,000 employees, but at the end of the day, you know, the recommendation, our superintendent can delegate everything but responsibility on that one. I want to be supportive of the vision and your organizational chart. I do believe on our school safety position, I pushed back on the job description because it also said the years of education experience. Because I want a total champion school safety expert there, and I don't necessarily think that comes from having to be in the school experience. And so, I do feel the same way about HR. 1,000 employees, that's a big crew. And, hopefully if we had something more focused on HR, because, one of the things I see on every single one of our presentations up here is it's either number 1 or number 2 is recruit and retain good people. And I would love to see, I know we can't do it with the staffing we currently have in HR, but I would love to see when we talk about supporting teachers and supporting the front line is having that recruitment effort come out of the HR department so our principals and our assistant principals are more focused on the student achievement and educational leadership as opposed to being HR. Because I remember those days when my kid, a baby at that time, could phone interview people because you spent your entire summer, he spent his entire summer listening to his dad recruit. And so if y'all need any help with him, I'll be glad to bring him up here and work in the HR office. But that's just what I wanted to say. I think you have done well with your organization of your cabinet, but I just want to see, particularly when that is an area of litigation, high litigation, that we have that specialty there in that position. So as it stands, as it's written right now, I'm not going to support it, but it's not because I don't believe in the vision. I just want to see the HR specialization working with those 1,000 employees and zeroing in on the recruitment. All right, so what I had to say, it's Dr. Egley Jr. up here. So we have a motion and we have a second. We're in discussion. So no, we're gonna wrap this up. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes 4-1 with Busen voting nay. Okay, at this time, board member business by district. Reverend Brown, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Stammerdike?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. The last couple of meetings, I've been pushing our CFO and our superintendent to look at impact fees, because I thought it would be another source of funding for us. Well, last week, I got to meet with Hendry County Planning and Community Development Director, Margaret M. Litch. And so we had a lengthy meeting on that process, which I thought, well, why don't we just do it? It isn't that process anymore. It's very involved. We have to do studies. And unfortunately, I think we can still do it, but it's not in our immediate future. So, I know Mr. Swindle and I have been talking about, we will be talking again about funding, but I had hoped that we were able to utilize that. It's down the road now. Another issue that I took, as I tell you every week, I watch the news, and this came up. Those students from Harms Marsh Middle School, obviously you've heard about them in Lehigh. Well, they had studied this, what they were going to do, and it was called an extensive study. They have looked at napalm, bombs, guns, all this scary stuff, and a lot of it was done on the school computers. And I just found this very concerning, because they didn't pick that up on the school computers until they researched the students. They got it because somebody told the student told the teacher, and that's how that, fortunately, how that solved itself. But I don't know how you would ever be able to look at when kids are doing exploratory stuff on our computers, and they're looking at guns. They had looked at both the concubine, and they had looked at the Parkland, Marjorie Storm and Douglas, and they had all this data about everything that was done. And it was just sort of scary that so much of their extensive study was done on school computers. I don't know whether we can go with it, but I just thought I'd mention it.
We have a Go Guardian program that monitors those computers, and even if those computers are at home, it will send those flags up about, is that correct, Mr.
Yes,
Adams?
correct.
All right.
Now, I know they do it for suicide and things like that. I mean, depression when a kid looks at that and things like that. I just didn't know whether they monitored any of this other stuff. Do you know, Mr. Adams?
I do, yes. It does support both explicit and self-harm. So we have pretty restrictive filtering in place for students. We remove, for example, out of YouTube, there's no comments, there's no suggestions, there's no ads to play. And then on the filtering side of the explicit, you get the same type of alerts that you would for self-harm or suicide or anything like that. We can pull reports that would show us basically every keystroke that a student makes.
So something like this where they've done that, would that have showed up on that program?
As far as anything a student does online, we have access to review.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
Does it flag you though?
What's
If
it
the kid was
flag?
looking up Columbine and guns? Okay.
We had a student at Clewiston High School that was typing a report and typed in, doing this crazy homework makes me want to kill myself. And within 15 minutes, guidance was there, pulled the kid out of class, took the kid to guidance and was like, he was joking around. He was like, no, I was just kidding. It was I was pushing back on homework, but it was that type of response on a very fast basis.
okay, well, thank you, Mr. Adams. Dr. Wrigley, thank you tonight. I really appreciated your input. That's it for me.
Mr. Basquin?
I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Nelson? Well, I yielded all my floor time to Dr. Egley, so I'm going to can my stuff for next week. What about you, Superintendent?
Just have a couple quick things, just some FYIs and reminders. Number one, board, we'll try to remember to send you out a reminder to remind you that on next Tuesday night, don't forget, that is our first hearing and joint public meeting with the Board of County Commissioners at 5 o'clock here in Clewiston at City Hall about the redistricting and those lines. Just, you'll know that, just as a reminder, and we'll try to send something out as a reminder for you Monday or so of next week, so you'll have that. Along those same lines, next week, you should have, I believe I emailed you last week, but I want to make sure you all received. Thursday, the 11th, in the mornings, we'll be doing the LaBelle area Golden Apple presentations, and Friday, the Clewiston area.
Would you say that one more time, please?
With the Golden Apple piece,
Yes.
on next Thursday, the 11th, we'll do the Golden Apple LaBelle area presentations. And we have that exact agenda if you need it again. It was in the email, but if you need it again, I can send it again. And then Friday the 12th, we'll be doing the Clewiston area ones. Everyone got that? And the last item that I have, and you've heard the name tonight, but I just want to take a minute to introduce a new addition to our staff since y'all have met last. Having the right people in the right places is absolutely key, just as Mr. Lukanous is the right person to lead the workforce development, and every director we have, I feel like, is absolutely stellar in what they do. It is paramount that we do what we can to improve student achievement. We need to build the capacity within our schools so that our principals and our leadership are able to continue leading teachers into being better teachers every single day. Last year it became evident as Clewiston Middle School went through their turnaround process with the State Bureau of School Improvement staff that was here, that in my mind, if it would work for a turnaround school, what would it do for the schools that we have otherwise? And as I watched that process, I was just continually impressed with Miss Devonia Allen sitting in the back of the room. And so to the point to where I begged and pleaded and hounded her, and Mr. Sanchez bribed her, and so we were blessed to get Miss Devonia Allen to join our team and family in Hendry. And so she is the administrator of school improvement. She works with both directors and all principals and staff at the schools to make sure that they are doing the best management practices to better prepare teachers every single day. And not that we don't have good teachers, but that pedagogy and those practices change. And Ms. Allen has a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience in making sure that we are meeting those state needs. We robbed her from the Bureau of School Improvement. She was living in Hillsborough County. Originally, she was from Belle Glade, Florida. And so she's walked in the shoes of our staff and our teachers and us and our students. And so it's good to have somebody from our area and region here making a huge difference and impact. So I wanted to make sure she was here so that y'all could put the face with the name, because obviously tonight you've already heard her name and the impact that she's having. So welcome, Ms. Allen. That's all that I have, Madam Chairman.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. At this time, seeing no further business before the board, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
Wow.